Well, hello and welcome to the Institute of Managers and Leaders, and thank you so much for joining us today for a fantastic webinar. We've got a great webinar lined up about preparing to rebound, developing leadership capability before you need it. And this is so important at the moment. And every day we talk to our corporate clients, and it's about talking about that rebound and making sure that the development opportunities are there for their staff. And I'm delighted today we've got Shannon Cooper talking to us about this topic, and I'll introduce Shannon shortly. Just quickly, my name's Sam Bell. I'm the General Manager here at the Institute, and I delightedly get the opportunity to host some of these webinars because they're always insightful and they're always an opportunity to learn about something new. And today is no different. We're talking about obviously the preparation preparing to rebound for staff, but more so getting through this really tough period. And we know all organisations at the moment and all employees are trying to get through this period the best possible. And really at the moment, it's about giving people the opportunity to grow and develop as much as anything. And I know Shannon's going to talk to us a little bit about that. Just to set up today's discussion, I'd just like to frame it in a sense of where it's coming from the Institute. Today's content and discussion is all set around our Leadership Essentials program. So our Leadership Essentials program, to use a sporting analogy, is our all-rounder. It's for those new to managing, it's for those stepping up into a management role, or it's even for those looking for a quick refresher or a quicker refresher than perhaps a more holistic program. So it's a totally virtual program, so it's accessible anywhere. We only run it virtually, and really we wanted to do this to support our regional managers in particular who don't have the opportunity to access our Accelerate or Foundations programs, which run face-to-face in capital cities. So Essentials is our virtual program, and it uses competencies from the IML competency framework, looking at things like self-development, leading individuals, leading teams, and keeping momentum when things get tough. And I think it's a great program for certainly this time, where a lot of us are working from home and a lot of us are having to make do without that face-to-face contact. What's involved in the Essentials program? It's 4 half days of facilitated learning, broken into 8 90-minute virtual sessions. And Shannon will talk a little bit about that at the end of today's session. It also includes the one-on-one coaching, like we do the coaching in all of our other programs, but it certainly includes the one-on-one coaching with your facilitator at the end of the program to talk about how you're going to implement the learning. It includes 2 diagnostic tools as part of it, both DISC and the IML 360. There's access to IML's Learning and Development portal through the program. It's tailed with 4 months of mentoring support, which is a huge advantage as part of a program to embed that learning. And it also comes with 1 year's membership to the Institute, which we hold dear, and we hope that allows you to continue to network and develop yourself and your skills through the offering that we give to our members, such as today's webinar. So really today is, as I said, to frame it, is really about the Leadership Essentials program, and Shannon will talk to us, really and try and learn through the lens of the Essentials program. Just some housekeeping. Obviously, when I get moved off, Shannon will talk for about 45 minutes, and we've got an opportunity to do questions, a Q&A session at the end, which is always fantastic, and Shannon always brings some really interesting insights to that Q&A. So please, if you've got questions throughout the webinar, please write them down in the question box, and we can either get to them straight away, or we'll get to them at the end. And also the availability of materials from today's discussion. We always get a huge interest in where can I get those materials, where can I get the stuff that Shannon was talking about. Please email us, and we'll have that email at the end for you to email us to have those materials that we'll send you directly. So we won't automatically send everyone the materials, we'll only send you the materials if you request it. So please hang around, and certainly we'll send those materials that Shannon goes through when you request it. But as I said, I really hope today's an engaging session. I know Shannon's got some really great content to share, and like I said, this Essentials program is is really our all-rounder. It's for everyone to certainly tap into, and it's very, very accessible for organisations and individuals to do. To welcome Shannon, I don't think Shannon needs much of an introduction. I feel like Shannon, I introduce you all the time, but Shannon's background is as a chemical engineer, but 15 years ago he left the lab, and he's been working with organisations large and small for the last, 2 decades almost, developing management capability, developing leadership skills, and doing what he does best. We're delighted that Shannon gives an enormous amount of time to the Institute. He facilitates our Essentials program, which I've just talked about. He also facilitates our Foundations program and also our Accelerate program. He's featuring in the upcoming Development Day for members, and Shannon also hosts regular webinars and masterclasses for the Institute. So I feel like, Shannon, we give you an introduction every time that's it's never quite meets your standard, but I'm delighted that today you're able to share these fantastic insights and also look at it through the lens of our Leadership Essentials program. So, Shannon, welcome.
Thank you, mate. Thank you. It's always great. It's always sort of, when someone introduces you like that, it's always sort of blush a little bit. But thank you. It's always absolutely a great honour to be able to present to our members and other sort of invited guests or other people who have come along today, because I know that people have given up an hour of their lunchtime. Maybe you've got a sandwich or something like that, or maybe it's afternoon tea time if you're coming from New Zealand. But I know that you've invested an hour of your time to sort of stop and to reflect, and I think that that's a really important thing to do right now, to take time out of the busyness to stop and reflect on who we are as leaders, how we're contributing to our organisations, and what else we might add to our toolkit. And today, that's exactly what we want to be talking about. But before we get into any of the stuff, just a quick question, and I'm just wondering, who are you? Who have we got on the call today? We've got quite a few people. I looked at the registration list, and we're expecting quite a large number today. And I'm just wondering if you could type into the chat box either a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4, or a 5. So a number 1 is if perhaps you're a senior leader or a business owner who's looking to develop emerging leaders within your team. Or perhaps number 2, which is that you're an HR professional or a learning and development professional seeking to accelerate leaders within your organisation. Or perhaps you are a new leader who's joining us today, looking with less than 12 months experience, looking to enhance your development, looking to accelerate, looking at the current context and saying, yeah, what do I need to do to step up to the plate? Or perhaps you're number 4, where you're an emerging leader who's yet to step up into a leadership role, but is certainly looking to take that next step in your career. Or perhaps number 5, you're in none of those categories, but you've got an interest in best practice in developing new and emerging leaders or supporting leaders within their growth. So just a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 into the chat box. Beautiful. So we're getting some things in there, and now starting to see that we've got a real mix of people, which is awesome. Good stuff. Fantastic. Excellent. Good. So we've got a real diversity, which is always fantastic and adds to the richness of the conversation, but also hopefully some of the questions that you've got when we get to question time as well. So Sam and I were doing a webinar last week, and we were talking about strategy, and we were talking about the world right now. And if you missed that webinar and you're keen to get a hold of it, let us know. If you're a member, the recording will be available for you online. But if you're not a member, please reach out to us, and we'll see what we can do there. But we were talking about the world right now, and of course, it's almost what's a cliche to sort of start off a webinar right now and talk about the world right now and some of the tumultuous change and disruptions that we're experiencing right across the world. And depending on the nature of your industry, the size of your business, even the state where you operate, or the footprint and geography of your business, it's a very volatile, uncertain, changing landscape right now, which poses a lot of challenges. And often we talk about, or the narrative is, the challenges that COVID represents for businesses. And I think that's true, but I also think that it's kind of inaccurate, because of course when we talk about challenges for businesses, we're not really talking about challenges for businesses, because a business is an inanimate object. A business doesn't have a challenge. What we're really talking about is the challenges for the people inside those businesses. businesses. That's the ones who face the challenges. And I suppose if we're even more particular about it, the challenges that leaders have right now, the challenges that leaders have in navigating and steering their organisation and the group of people inside that organisation through what's happening right now. And often we can get very pessimistic about that, and we pick up the press. This time last week, Sam, you and I were sitting here, and we'd learnt about the news that the financial data had come out that confirmed what we knew, that Australia had entered a recession for the first time in 30 odd years, and quite a deep and quick state of recession at that. So we hear a lot about the challenges, but today is not so much about the challenges, but more about the opportunities. Today is more about the opportunities. And we here at the Institute of Managers and Leaders are very optimistic. And again, our webinar last week was all about that optimism. Optimistic that for agile leaders, agile businesses, for businesses that are able to respond effectively and efficiently right now, there is an enormous amount of opportunity out there as well. And that's not to be ignorant to the fact of the enormous amount of pain that's being experienced out there now with redundancies, businesses closing down. We're not ignorant to that at all. But I think historically, when we look through any period of significant economic disruption or historical crisis, what we see is that there is an enormous amount of opportunities as well. But those opportunities can really only be realised and understood and unlocked if we have organisations that are full of intentional leaders. And here at the Institute of Managers and Leaders, we talk a lot, of course, about intentional leaders. If you've ever been to one of my webinars, programs, masterclasses, you'll know that we, or any other that's offered by any of the wonderful team here at the Institute of Managers and Leaders, you'll know that we talk a lot about this intentional leader, this leader who shows up each day with a sense of purpose, a sense of drive, a sense of ambition, a sense of alignment between his or her actions and behaviours that are consistent with what the organisation's strategy needs to be. Someone who can steer the organisation in a dynamic and an emergent way. Someone who leads their people with a sense of purpose, a sense of empathy, a sense of adaptability and dexterity. Right. So if we really want to unlock these opportunities exist, it's not about the businesses having these characteristics, it's about leaders having these characteristics and being intentional about what they're doing right now. Because the reality is that some leaders aren't intentional. In fact, some leaders lead their organisations in a very chaotic way. There's a lot of chaos out there right now externally, but what we're also seeing is leaders who are very chaotic in their approach as well. But of course, what we know is, and if you've ever worked with a leader who is very chaotic, you know that has a very destructive impact on the organisational culture, hardly a helpful culture. But then, some leaders might not be chaotic, but they're certainly resistant. They're resistant to some of the changes that are happening right now. And again, sometimes we hear about leaders who are hoping that this will just blow over. And if you're living in the state of Victoria right now, you know that that's not the case. Looking at the COVID numbers in New South Wales and particularly Queensland today, I think it's not right to be resistant or just hoping that this is going to blow over and that business or the economy will settle back to a prosperous place very quickly. So when we've got a leader who's kind of got their head in the sand like that, that can lead to people feeling very disillusioned because there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect between what they're seeing, what they're experiencing, and how they're feeling to the way that their leader is responding right now. Or then we just might have a leader who's distracted, a leader who kind of, not so much resistant, but kind of recognises what's going on, but is kind of distracted by the easy stuff, distracted by the stuff that is native to them, or maybe distracted by something that is a little bit more favourable to them. And of course, if we've got a leader like that, then we can lead to people who are disinterested. Because it kind of, we look at the leader and go, well, you're distracted. You're not focusing on the real problems. You're not really dealing with the stuff that's happening here and now. You're kind of off over there dealing with that tangential stuff. So why should I be interested in supporting right now? And leaders who operate from this kind of chaotic, resistant or distracted phase, we might describe them as, again, these sort of accidental leaders who are stuck. These are leaders who are not intentionally in this space, but often these types of results is what we see of accidental leaders. And we use this term accidental leaders to describe people who have been put into a leadership position without adequate care, nurturing, or development are kind of put into a position of leadership because they were really good day-to-day contributors, really good at getting results done, effective and efficient, wonderful at building relationships, could, just always those superstars. So we put them into a leadership position and we go, there you go, off you go. And then we wonder why they get stuck. We wonder why they behave in this kind of chaotic, resistant, or distracted manner. In other words, it's not always their fault, particularly if they're a new and emerging leader. It's just that they're stuck. So the challenge for organisations, particularly right now, is to not have leaders, particularly emerging leaders, within this area. And we want to help them become intentional. And the first step towards becoming intentional is to be a leader who is adapting to what's happening right now. So not distracted, but to be a leader who's adapting. Right? Because if we've got a leader who's adapting, then we've got a team and a culture that is developing. But beyond adapting, we also want a leader who is performing. So not only adapting, but embracing what's happening and performing to a high level within this current context. And again, if we've got a leader, of course, who is performing, then we've got a team that's delivering. So not only developing, but a team that is kicking goals. And of course, if we've got teams that are kicking goals, we've got an organisation that's kicking goals. And then, okay, so the highest level is a leader who's now transforming. A leader who is having an impact on the team or his or her organisation that is allowing us to transform and adapt and to be agile with the changing circumstances where we find ourselves. The term we're using a lot now is pivoting. We talk about businesses pivoting. Businesses aren't pivoting. The strategy is pivoting, and the decision makers are pivoting their decision making. And of course, if we've got a leader who's doing that, then we've got a team that's distinguished. Someone that's helping us position our organisation so that we're a case study for future generations within our industry, as someone who was able to deal with the COVID crisis with a level of not only maturity but adaptability and agility. And it's these leaders that we describe as intentional leaders, those ones that maintain momentum. And really, the Leadership Essentials program that Sam spoke about is an all-rounder program that is designed to equip leaders with the skills that they need to stop being stuck and to gain some momentum, to give that initial thrust of force. It's like trying to move a heavy rock. That initial thrust, that initial push has to be quite significant. But once they've got momentum with appropriate level of support and guidance, that's easier to continue. And really, that's what our Essentials program is designed to do. Those accidental stuck leaders, how do we get them up above the curve and move them into that intentional space? So the question often starts here, of course, is, well, how do we find these leaders? How do we find these leaders in the first place before we even sort of put them into this place where we risk them being accidental? We've got people in our, we know that we need to keep our foot on the gas right now. We need to develop new leaders, and these leaders do need new skills. But how do we even find them? Right? We don't want to create accidental leaders, but where do we even find these emerging leaders in the first place? So one of the ways, and we talk about this in some of our Accelerate program, in fact, and it's a useful model, and of course it's the McKinsey sort of 9-box model. This is a really great way for you to think about identifying your emerging leaders and talent within your organisation. Now, this has been around for a long time, and I'm sure many of you have seen or maybe even used this model before. 9 boxes, some organisations use 4, some sort of expand it out and have 16 boxes, but the key is around thinking about the people within your team against 2 key parameters, and those parameters are performance versus potential. And by thinking about our people against these 2 sort of parameters, what happens is that it gives us a bit of a way of thinking about who are those that we need to develop, who are those who might be ready to be put into a leadership role. We don't want to make them accidental, but who are we ready to kind of put and invest so that we can help them or prevent them from being an accident. I think also too that as these new ways and these new capabilities become the new norm and things are shifting over the last 6 months, I think it's worthwhile reconsidering what potential looks like and what performance looks like in your organisation, because the reality is that there's emerging skills, there's emerging capabilities that are required. So in other words, how you measure the potential of your people against the skills and qualities might look very different to what it did 6 months ago. So Wayne Gretzky, my father's Canadian, so I end up learning a little bit bit about ice hockey. And whether you know much about ice hockey or not, you may have heard of the name Wayne Gretzky, often considered to be the greatest ice hockey player of all time. And of course, he was once quoted as saying, and perhaps you've heard this quote, he was once quoted as saying, you know, that the key to his success is that he doesn't play to where the puck is. He plays to where the puck, where the puck, got to be careful with that, he plays to where the puck will be. And I think that when you are measuring the potential of your people, it's about you thinking about where is your strategy going to be and who are the people that have the potential to help your organisation get to where the puck will be. Where is your market being? Where is your industry heading, and who has that potential? And what's their current level of performance like? And again, this 9-box model can kind of help us conceptualize that. And the way it kind of works, of course, and again, if you have never seen it before, it's often used in succession planning and development planning. And the way it works is that you just, you know, the x-axis performance, and we might talk about low performance, medium performance, or high performance. You know, below expectations, acceptable level, or exceeds expectations. And then, of course, potential, which is, well, yeah, it doesn't have a lot of potential because kind of at their capacity now, versus an average level of, you know, potential in terms of, well, you know, they could go a little bit, but they're probably close to the mark and they have a little bit of room for lateral or depth to their skill set, but they're kind of there. Or someone we see who has a lot of potential. Now, of course, what happens is, and as I'm talking, I'd love for you just to create this 9-box, you know, create a simple box on a piece of paper right now and start to think about your team. Start to think about the people in your organisation, particularly those that are kind of, in operational teams, and start to sort of plot them, put their initials. Where do they kind of fit? Just anecdotally, not even if there has to be a firm measurement here, just anecdotally and intuitively, where would you put them on the box? And often what we find is, of course, that those ones that we put into leadership positions often sit in that top right-hand box, that high-performance box or superstars box, the high performers with still a hell of a lot of potential to go. They're already doing great and they've got so much more to give. So, of course, they're the ones that we as organisations say, let's put them into a leadership role. The reality is, though, that they're also the ones that we let down. They're also the ones that we let down. The reason is because we put them into a leadership role without any level of support. We put them into a leadership role without any level of support, and they are faced with an extraordinary amount of challenges. So again, just as a quick moment before I talk about those, start to, again, plot yours out and then ask yourselves, you know, as a leader or, you know, within your context of organisational context, what are some of the proactive measures that you have to accelerate the development of those high performers? But also, too, you know, those people are in the periphery as well. Those people with still with a high potential, but might be performing at an acceptable level. What are we doing to accelerate them as well? Again, we don't be ignorant to all those other boxes. It's just that it's not the focus of today's webinar. It really is those people, because they're often where our new leaders come from. And then, of course, as I said, we take those people and we say, congratulations, you're now a manager, you're now a boss. Here, have the title coordinator, supervisor, team leader, whatever it might be. And this is your team, your team of 3, your team of 4, your team of 5, your team of 15. You know, off you go, good luck. We know you'll be right. But as I said, those new leaders face an enormous amount of challenges. So I want you to have a little bit of a moment. Think about your first leadership role. For those of you that this question is applicable to, think about your first leadership role, whatever that looked like and whenever that might have been. What were some of the challenges that you had, right? Or might be some of the challenges that you're experiencing right now. And what impact do you reckon that those challenges had on you? And how you were dealing with those challenges, what impact do you reckon they had on your team as you were trying to wrestle with those? And then furthermore, what impact did that have on your organisation as well? You know, if you've got again, you think about those accidental, maybe you were chaotic, right? Maybe your team was disillusioned. Maybe you were resistant to what was going on. Maybe you didn't understand the nuances of moving into leadership. So what was the impact for you, right? And what we know is when we talk to our participants in our Essentials program and participants in our Foundations of Intentional Leadership program, this is what they tell us. This is what they tell us. One of the first things we do is they tell us about the challenges. And they'll often say, well, look, you know, one of the challenges we have is about just developing managerial and personal effectiveness. I don't actually know what it looks like to be a good job as a leader, as a manager. That's kind of tricky for me. Never been in that situation. And then I've got to manage my mates, right? These people that I'm now leading were once my mates. We used to go to the pub on a Friday night and whinge about management, but now I am management. How do I do that? And how do I exercise a sense of authority over these people that I'm friends with, that I've worked with for a long time? And how do I communicate against these different contexts? You know, now I have to go to a management meeting and present every month or every quarter. How do I do that? You know, I'm getting emails from the CEO. I never used to get emails from the CEO. How do I respond to those? How do I lead my team? How do I lead my team towards getting results? I'm used to being a day-to-day contributor and doing my stuff really well, but now I've got to lead the team and kind of understand the diversity that exists. And not only that, I've got to hold people to account and I've got to manage performance. What happens when someone's not doing a good job? I've never had to deal with that before. Now I've somehow got to hold people to account and give them feedback and have performance conversations. And I've got to work with this diversity of people, not just my team, but my peer network as well. Other managers and leaders with their own sort of nuances and personalities, motivators and stresses and wants and needs. I've never had to deal with them before, but now I do. I've got to motivate people. I don't motivate. I don't know. Can't they just do their job? And I've got to somehow delegate because I realise that I can't possibly do everything and I'm feeling overwhelmed. I know that I've got to get some stuff off my plate, but I don't know how to do that. And I've got to manage conflict. What happens when these two are fighting? They want to have a steel cage match to the death in the car park after work. How do I deal with that? And how do I coach people? They keep telling me I've got to coach people. I don't know how to do that. So this is what happens. These are the challenges that leaders face every day, these new leaders. And this is what happens. This is why they react in that sort of chaotic way, that accidental manager. These are not characteristics or these are not challenges that an intentional leader feels comfortable dealing with these challenges. An accidental leader is kind of all at sea. And this is not just this. This is some statistics from the Centre of Creative Leadership. Right? They also did some research around this, and they said that these first-time leaders and managers, 20% are doing a pretty crappy job according to their subordinates. So 20%, 1 in 5 people say, new boss is doing a pretty ordinary job. And 26% of managers, so over a quarter of them, say that they don't feel like they're ready to lead others to begin with. They wanted the job, right? They aspired to leadership and management, but they realised once they got there that they weren't really ready to take that jump. And 60% say that I never received any training when I transitioned into my first leadership role. Okay, so these numbers are real, right? And our experience at IML is that these numbers are very consistent with our experience as well. And in some cases, they're even higher than that. So the question is, well, why does this happen? Why does this happen? Why do we take the disconnect between these shooting stars, these high performers, and then we put them into a position of leadership, and then it all comes crashing down? Well, we reckon that there's 3 key mistakes that kind of occur that contribute to this, and I want to share them with you and think about whether or not you make them, or you've experienced them, or perhaps your organisations make these mistakes. So the first one is that we intend to develop our people. We don't mean to kind of leave them sort of flailing about without any sort of sense of development or support. It's just that development support isn't particularly meaningful. It's not particularly sort of meaningful. In other words, making this leap from an individual contributor to first-time manager is often amongst the most challenging transitions in anyone's career. Right, and even having to have this new identity is kind of tricky. And if I know, and this is where the meaning comes into it, if I know that my boss, he or she, is one step ahead of me and is really thinking about adding meaning to my training and development, giving me stuff that is actually appropriate, applicable, relevant, implementable. In other words, the training has a sense of meaning rather than just sending me off to this course or that course, or asking me to read this book, or providing me with a bit of coaching or a bit of feedback during my weekly. But that's not meaningful development, right? Meaningful development and guidance of people is one of the keys to making that transition into leadership a smooth one. And we think here, if we think about those challenges, and even some of the challenges that perhaps you reflected upon, we here at the Institute of Managers and Leaders think, well, hang on, then meaningful training means that we're wrestling with those challenges. If we want our training and development opportunities to be meaningful, then it has to wrestle with those challenges, has to deal with those challenges. And when we think about those challenges, I think it's fair to say that they almost fall into 3 key contexts, right? 3 key contexts. The first set of challenges is all about self-management. It's how do I manage this new identity that I have? How do I manage myself in this new context? The second theme that I think you'd agree that many of those challenges sinks down into is, how do I manage and lead my team? How do I manage and lead how do I manage and lead my team? And of course, the third one is, how do I lead and manage the individuals as well? And I think that the three challenges, if we want training to be development, whether it's coaching, whether it's formal training, whether it's mentorship, whatever it is, if it's meaningful, then ask yourself, is the things that we're doing for our emerging leaders, does it help them wrestle with these three themes? Because if you wrestle with these themes, you're probably making it meaningful because you're dealing with the challenges. That's the engineering me. I like that kind of sequence. The other thing I think that is really important about meaningful training, of course, in today's world, particularly as emerging leaders are often, more often than not, tend to be the younger demographic in many organisations. Not always, but often the case. But even older ones. The meaningful training happens when I can implement it quickly, when I can be able to not only pick and choose what I take away from any development opportunity, but I'm also empowered to be able to give it that meaning by implementing it, by doing something. In other words, don't just give me the theory, don't just give me the models, but give me the opportunity and the freedom to add meaning to those models and theories by applying it in my workplace. So there's a question here of relevance, there's a question here of appropriateness, there's a question here about accessibility, which we'll talk about again. So I think one of the things that we need to do is to think about, what opportunities are we doing to enable people to implement their training? Because if they can, or the development or the coaching or the support that you give them, because if they can do that, then it adds extra meaning for that lived experience. So one of the things that we try to do here at the Institute of Managers and Leaders, of course, is use a model or a framework called the 70-20-10 model. And I'm sure many of you will have heard this before. It was first published by Morgan McCall and some colleagues at the Centre of Creative Leadership, well over probably 30 odd years ago now. And what they did was studied a group of executives and tried to understand how people learn and retain information, particularly adults. And what they experienced very quickly was that 70% of what we know, what we retain and what we practice has been learnt through on-the-job application, through experiencing something, through trying something, through making mistakes and pivoting and iterating, right? So 70%, the vast majority comes from that place, right? 20% comes from what we might call peer-to-peer learning. So it's learning from other people, conversations with others, communities of practice, coaching, mentoring, managerial support, those who are ahead of the game, etc. And only 10% comes from more formal settings, webinars, for example, face-to-face training, reading books, those types of traditional areas. And this is interesting, right? So it means that if we really want to add meaning to our training and development of new leaders and give them stuff that they can implement, then we have to be creating opportunities for them to implement. And again, one of the things that we do here at the Institute of Managers and Leaders, and it's a hallmark of all of our programs, is this heavy focus on implementation. It's that heavy focus on doing. It's that heavy focus on making sure that not only the stuff that we talk about is relevant, contemporary, aligned with where the puck will be, so to speak, but also stuff that the people can implement. And we implore that, in fact, we demand that of participants in our program, because we know that not only leads to what we might call learning transfer, but most importantly, it adds to the meaningfulness of our programs. So that's the first mistake we see. So one of the questions you might want to be asking yourself right now is, is the training and development that we offer new leaders, does it wrestle with those challenges? Does it work within those three lenses? Are we providing them with an opportunity to implement? Because if you're not, then perhaps your training, it has no meaning. I'm just being sent off to this course. Okay, good. So that someone can tick a box. There's no real meaning behind it. The second mistake that we see a lot of leaders make is that they don't make the training important. And what do we mean by importance? Well, what we see is that organisations, and I think particularly now, if we say that the world is changing and developing new capabilities in leaders is critically important, and we are going to need new leaders coming through. If we are to navigate this and take advantage of those opportunities, we need new leaders coming through. So therefore, the development of those leaders is important. And the reality is, for some organisations, it's simply not important. There's a disconnect because they say that it's important, but they don't actually follow through with that. They don't allow their people, they don't build the development development of their strategic processes. They don't build the development of new and emerging leaders into their financial processes and other sort of planning processes. In other words, we kind of just do it when we need to do it, or when there's a new leader who we see struggling, then we say, okay, let's help him or her out, let's give him a bit of a leg up. Whereas it's important, and I know that if I'm supported before I take the step onto leadership, into a leadership role, but when I do get into a leadership role, it's important enough because there is a process that I can tap into. It's already there. It's part of what the organisation does as part of their human resource strategies, their broader strategic plan. They say it's important for us to recognise and reward and develop new leaders. There's the money that's been put aside for my development. These are signals that says to an emerging leader that it is important. Right? When it's kind of done in this ad hoc way, when we've got to fight for the resources, for the time away from the office, whatever it might be, that signals to these people that it's just not important. And again, think about the consequence of that. If they think that it's not important, then the natural sort of logical flow of that is that they think that their development's not important. If they think that their development's not important, then they can get to a place where they think that they're not important. So it leads with someone who's disengaged and again gets stuck at those accidental levels. So part of the challenge here is how do we do that? Well, I think there's part of it which is let's put that stake in the ground and say it's important, but then also have a range of different options for people. Make the learning, provide opportunities for personalised growth, personalised training, adaptable learning journeys, etc. Have opportunities where, again, there's that linkage between making it meaningful, but also important when people have the opportunity to implement that learning. When you come back from a formal learning environment and your boss sits down and has a chat with you, but then not only the boss sits down and has a chat with you, but says, hey, it's important for you to now implement, that sends a very clear signal that my development is important to me, that this is important. So, yeah, just that's the second mistake we made. There's a disconnect between, hey, we say it's important, but that's not the experience. I don't feel important. I don't think my development is important. So we kind of check out of the process a little bit as well. I reckon a really good example of this, and I just made a note of it, a really good example of this is Microsoft. I remember when Satya Nadella took over as the CEO of Microsoft from Mike Bulmer, I think was the previous CEO. If you've never seen Mike Bulmer in full flight, you should YouTube him. A very extroverted, high-energy leader he was. Satya less so, but an effective leader nonetheless. And I think Satya took over in about 2014, 15, something like that. But one of the things that they did, he made learning and development essential. He said that this is important for us, not just because we're a technology company, so we've got to stay ahead of the trend, but it's important because we need leaders who are continuing to evolve our organisational capability and adaptability. And if we don't invest in the learning and development of our people, we're going to get left behind very, very quickly. So he committed to developing a growth mindset culture and a development culture across the whole organisation. And I remember hearing a quote from him. He said, we need to move from being an organisation that thinks we know it all to an organisation that thinks we need to learn it all. And I love that. That's a very clear signal from the top. We need to move from an organisation that thinks we know it all to an organisation that thinks we need to learn it all. And that sort of, he worked very hard to make that, again, not just a strategic level of intent, but right across the whole organisation. Thinking about both formal learning, informal learning, social learning opportunities, how they were developing, formal learning pathways, a whole gamut of stuff. It became part of their ethos, a strategy that was very successful. So I think they're a hallmark or a benchmark of an organisation that says, let's make the development of our people, including our emerging leaders, important. Then the third mistake that we often see made is making the learning and development accessible. And what do we mean by accessibility? Well, I think organisations make learning accessible, again, when they focus on the learner experience. And again, to go back to what I said before, I think this means not just thinking about this course or that course, but focusing on something that is accessible for that particular person. What is going to resonate with that person? How do they like to learn? What is the best way so that they can access the whether it's a program, whether it's online materials, whether it's the key supporters, advocates, coaches, mentors, other key people within those networks, internally or outside. Are those things accessible for that person? In other words, can I get all the things that I need to do to learn? again, and it's not just about going to a course and having access to the facilitator. It's much broader than that. Do I have access to all the things that I need to do to piece all the pieces of my development journey together so that I can learn and grow, right? And that's got to be careful because it's going to look different, right, in each person's sort of context. So that's what we mean by accessibility. And of course, accessibility also means logistics, without doubt. And I think it's interesting, one of the things that's interesting about logistics is we're seeing just how easy and accessible online learning is for many organisations and for many participants. Sam spoke about it in your introduction, where learning and development, conferences, professional development. If you're working in a regional location, flying someone to a capital city was very expensive, and sometimes so expensive that it was prohibitive. Whereas now it's a lot more accessible because all we need is not even a computer. All we need is an iPhone, and we can tap into some learning and development. And I think online learning and development, of course, have been around for a long period of time, and it's a well-used delivery method for a long period of time now. But during this current outbreak, it's become the only development channel that many of us have had access to. Particularly for us here in Victoria, we were not allowed 5 kilometres outside of our house. And like everything else, I think that as we experienced, just because we couldn't do face-to-face learning, we had to rely on online systems. And I reckon we've become pretty good at it. Most organisations like us and others, even internally, communicating via virtual means, we've become really good at it. And I think what we're starting to notice is that some of the scepticism around virtual or online or remote development is kind of waning quite a lot. I think a lot of that scepticism comes because a lot of organisations didn't understand, beyond the accessibility of it, just how good it could be and some of the potential benefits. We often talk to our clients, and they'll often talk to us about, face-to-face or online. Is online really as good as face-to-face? Well, I'm kind of pleased to tell you that not only is virtual learning wonderfully accessible for all of our members, both regional and metro, but our feedback and our results throughout the last 6 months tell us that the satisfaction with our programs is delivered virtually is neck and neck and on a par with our face-to-face experience. In other words, we're seeing consistent results between what our participants are saying in terms of the meaningfulness, the relevance of it, the applicability of the programs is just the same in the virtual space to what it was in the face-to-face space. And between you and me, here at IML, we have some fairly lofty expectations of our programs, both face-to-face and virtually. So we're really proud of the results that we've had. From a learner experience, it's on a par, but of course also for many organisations, the virtual space allows for scalability as well, which makes often learning and development much more accessible to a broad range of people. So there's a range of different benefits here when we talk about accessibility, but fundamentally it is accessible for those people. Can they access the things that they need to add meaning to their learning and development? So there we have 3 key mistakes that a lot of organisations make when it comes to developing new leaders. And I don't think that right now we can afford to be making these mistakes. We should be putting our foot on the pedal to make sure that we are developing new capabilities, that we are developing our new leaders, because they are going to be critical to helping us move forward. So have a think about those. Think about those mistakes. Is the training and development that you offer within your organisation, is it meaningful? Is it given a level of importance, and is it accessible? Which of those mistakes do you make, and how might we overcome those things? So let's now talk about how we might overcome some of these mistakes. And as Sam said, unashamedly, we're here today, or here to sort of talk to you a little bit about how we can potentially support you in that. But also too, even if this isn't the solution for you, I think it gives you a nice framework for even internal conversations with other leaders in your organisation. And that is, of course, how do we develop some training and development to give people that initial momentum, to make sure that they don't get stuck in the rut of being an accidental leader and can develop quick momentum to become an intentional leader really fast, but also by doing so in a way that makes the training important, meaningful and accessible, because that's really what we want to have. And again, it's core to our DNA here anyway, so we're really proud of this program. And of course it is, as Sam mentioned, we call it the Intentional Leaders Essentials Program. And this Intentional Leaders Essentials program is really designed around this. And as it says here on the slide here, this is the kind of the learning focus. This is the heart of what pumps this program. And it's designed to help leaders as we sort of transition into this new space where we have to manage the complexities of this current and emergent environment. How do we master and get a handle on some of the great leadership and management tools and techniques, the essential tools and techniques to effectively guide our teams and ourselves and the organisation through this period of change. And we've designed this 4-week program designed to rapidly develop these fundamental skills. That's what it's all about. Take it to the next level, move out of accidental into intentional. And it's designed to take a sense of understanding on where these new leaders are and provide them with just that. And it's curated not just around facilitated workshops in the virtual space, but it's also got online study with this profiling, there's leadership coaching, there's mentoring, there's workplace projects to add that meaning. In other words, it's essentially geared towards making sure that 70-20-10, those meaningful aspects are really dealt with in a very savvy way. From a more of a logistical perspective, this is what the program looks like. As we said, it kind of it plays out. So it starts off whereby each participant undertakes 2 diagnostic reports, an IML 360, whereby they get some 360-degree feedback on how they are performing at the moment against those 3 criteria of managing self, managing and leading individuals, and managing and leading their teams. So they get some real-time feedback, a snapshot in terms of this is how you're currently going. And that feedback is both qualitative and quantitative and presented to them in a very detailed, rich report. Wonderfully insightful for helping people understand where they're currently at. And we also asked them to do a DISC report. And many of you will have heard of DISC before, but DISC is a great way and a simple way and an accessible way and a meaningful way for you to understand your natural kind of preferences, the types of environments that you like to work, having a deeper understanding of your stresses and motivators. So it's a self-awareness tool, but it also helps us become more empathetic and understanding of others as well, and understanding the impact that we have on others. So we do that before we even kick off. And then that first workshop, that first module 1, it's all about managing self. So it's taking the results of those feedback reports and reflecting deeply on them, and then asking ourselves, okay, that's where we want to be. Again, where's the puck, and what do I need to do to bridge that gap? Mixed in with a great range of, again, contemporary relevant tools that are put together for the here and the now. And then after that first workshop, they go away and they complete a personal action plan and a learning experiment. And that learning experiment is shared not just with the group, but it's shared with their manager and leader as well. So there's visibility at that leadership and management level. Then module 2 is about leading and managing individuals. Again, one of those challenges they said they face. So we have a look at a broad range of tools and techniques, building on, compounding the learning from module 1 into module 2. And again, there's a personal action plan and a learning experiment. Here's what I learned. This is what I'm going to do. Module 3 is about leading and managing teams. So now, now it's not just the individuals, but the collection of individuals and the nuances that come with trying to get a team to work cohesively and synergistically. So we have a look at, again, some ways of doing that, again, in a very practical, meaningful way. And on the back of that, of course, an action plan and a learning experiment made visible to all of us, including the leader and manager for that level of support. And of course, at each module, we do a check-in. Hey, what did you do? What was your experiment? What did you learn? What was the outcomes? And we guide them through that process. And then module 4 is all about maintaining momentum, which is about looking at some of those additional skills, looking at ideas around coaching, delegation, maintaining a health and safe workplace, mental well-being, caring for our people, etc. So we look at some of those more sort of nuanced and sophisticated tools. And then at the end of that, they receive some one-on-one coaching, an hour with their facilitator. So if I'm facilitating the program, or with me, where we debrief the program. We look at the key aspects where it need a little bit more contextualisation, areas that they want to go a little bit more deeper on, and we put together a development plan for themselves so that then they can move into a mentorship a relationship facilitated through IML. And as Sam said, they get 4 months of formal mentoring on the back of that, and we guide them through that process in conjunction with their IML IML professional membership, which allows them to access all the wonderful tools, webinars like you're on today, online resources, etc., plus our alumni group. So it really is this sort of kickstart program designed to get those accidental leaders out of that rut very quickly and move them into that intentional space. So again, there's a few other if the infographic didn't work for you, here it is written down in real words. And the results, we've been running this program, as Sam said, for the last little while, and we've had some fantastic results. And this is from Mel. And Mel is a human resources manager, again, a very intentional leader herself. And the development of people for her is critically important, and particularly right now. She is someone who is pushing harder on the floor, recognising that we need new leaders. We have to continue to develop them right now. It's not the time to sort of rein in the L&D budget. It's actually time to expand it. And again, history tells us this, by the way. We often read the statistics, but organisations that retreat from learning and development right now often find that at some point in time they have to catch up. We look at the GFC, and a lot of organisations, had to, and again, it happens because of some of the financial constraints or the scarcity of resources. But they shrink their learning and development budget, but then work out, a couple of years down the line, that they're now behind the curve. They're getting left behind the competition, so they end up having to beef up their L&D spend to get back up to a status quo position. So in other words, they end up not saving money; they're just kind of deferring the payment. But Mel's not one of those, and she's had quite a few people go through the program, and this is what she had to say, that it was a fantastic program. The facilitator was excellent and engaging, and the content really useful and practical. My team were a bit hesitant about doing it, online, really the way to do it, but they said that the breakout rooms worked really well. Delivering virtually also gives her scope to send more team members who are in regional or remote place with no travel expenses. And here's what some of the participants had. So we had a participant from a non-for-profit organisation who said that one of the most valuable things that she took from the program was to nut out some issues that she was having in the workplace with fellow participants. So that collegiate approach, adding meaning by talking to others about it. And she now has a plan to implement some changes that other people had already tried, which is really good. We also had an engineering company, a project manager, so a really skilled, technician put into a position of project management, and was then, again, off you go, work it out. And he said that it was a really eye-opening program for him. It gave him some real perspective on how he is doing as a new manager. So, we're getting results like this. We could have filled slides and slides up with some fantastic testimonials of this program. So it's something that we're really proud of. So before we open up to any questions, Sam, let me just summarise some of the things that we've looked at today. And that is that here's the challenges. We know that many new leaders experience a lot of challenges, and we think that these are kind of almost magnified within the current context. Is that new managers experience challenges within the areas of managing self, managing leading teams, and managing and leading individuals. And I don't think that organisations and leaders are ignorant to these, but it's just that when the development comes, they make mistakes. They either don't make it meaningful. In other words, it's something that's too generic or doesn't have an applicability or relevance to that particular context, or it's just not important. We kind of just, look, they're struggling, we should send them off to a course so we can tick that box, right? There's no real strategic alignment. There's no real sort of planning. There's no real sort of intention behind that development. And finally, it's not really accessible. In other words, I've kind of, I'm not given the time to do it, or I don't know where to access the resources, or I'm sent off to this thing or that thing, but I don't know who to talk to when I come back at work. I don't have access to coaches, facilitators, mentors, and the other resources that I need to really make my development sing. So one of the ways that here at the IML can support that is through our Leadership Essentials program. So this is a way that we can support you in this. So, I think that absolutely right now organisations are having to make a lot of decisions. They're making a lot of decisions about what they're doing with their resources. And I think one of the most critical decisions that you can be making right now is to think about what the future of leadership needs to look like in your organisation and what you are doing to prepare yourself for that right now, so that you don't get left behind and you're not one of these organisations that isn't wasn't prepared enough to take advantage of some of the opportunities that are existing right now, or not prepared enough to deal with some of the challenges that face, simply because there is a leadership vacuum. Because I know that we get to, as we move through this crisis, there is going to be a leadership vacuum in a lot of organisations, simply because organisations haven't taken the time now to play where the puck will be. Beautiful. So let's I'll hand over to you, Sam. I'm sure perhaps some questions have come in or will come in. So I'll hand back to you. And if we have got any questions, let's chat about those.
Shannon, we've got a lot of questions for you, but we don't have much time, so we'll have to be quick. I want to make one point just on the back of you as the general manager of this area. The only thing I really look for is the practical outcomes that are demonstrated back into the workplace. So it's the feedback from the line managers and the L&D managers for their staff to go through. What they say about the program tells me a great deal about the impact it's having back in the workplace. And Shannon obviously showed some of the testimonials from the program, but I can tell you, I see that every day in terms of that feedback coming back from line managers and HR managers about the impact this has in the workplace. And that's the most important thing from my perspective and IML's perspective, that we're actually having positive practical impacts where people are improving themselves and their processes and the way they conduct themselves. They manage teams, they manage individuals in a far better capacity than what they did before the program. So I can certainly make that point, because I wanted to make that point at the beginning, but you reminded me of it, Shannon, so thank you. So a couple of questions. Natalie, do you need to be in a formal leadership role to go through this program?
No, not at all. In fact, if you are someone who is looking to take that first step and really wants to lean into leadership with almost a head start, to again avoid getting stuck into that accidental rut and to learn some of the skills that you'll need to make that transition easy for you, this is a wonderful program for you as well.
Shannon, something that's a little bit more technical, it's probably based on some of the content you talked about from Gareth. What is your advice when dealing with a boss that is highly compliance focused and lacks diversity to manage within a dynamic environment?
Cool. Hey, so my mind straight went to, I think it's full. Gareth, we've got a wonderful webinar tomorrow, or masterclass tomorrow, sorry, which a masterclass is a longer format with a small group, very interactive, on managing up. Yep. But I don't know whether it's full, but you might want to check that out, Gareth. Look, I think that's part of this is...
That's a very good plug.
I think one of the, in broad terms, Gareth, I think part of it is about understanding take the compliance aspect out of it for a moment and think about the personality of the people that you have to deal with, and think about he or she as a person. What are their stresses? What are their motivators? What are they worried about? How do they like to access information? What types of things do they need to be able to make a decision? And I think and again, it's a high level answer, but once you understand that a little bit more, then we're in a better position to be able to influence that person by behaving in a way that is amenable and accessible to them, so that we can get the results that we want, or at least have the conversations that we want to have. So I don't think it's necessarily, I get that it's about compliance, but it's not really about the compliance. It's about having a deeper understanding of the individual and how to communicate with the individual, which again is part of what we look at within the Essentials program.
Gareth just sent through and said he's already signed up for tomorrow's masterclass.
Hey! Oh, excellent! Beautiful. I look forward to it.
And yeah, I think it is full actually. Yeah, it'll be a great one, managing that one. Okay, last question, because I know we're getting pretty close to the time. As an HR manager, this is from Michelle. My experience is that I've seen no difference from when I put staff into training courses when they come back to the office. Yeah. How are you saying is different to that?
So we've put a few things in place. So one of the, to give you a couple of examples, Michelle, is that the first one is around the action planning and the experiment. So there's this, and that's a non-negotiable. You have to do that, and there's an expectation that we do that. The other key aspect, and we might say, yeah, well, so what? Whatever. But here's what happens. After each one of these workshops, you get some communication from me through a video, You also get, as a supporter, whether it's HR, whether it's a line manager, whoever that person is kind of reports to. And you also get a written summary of what we spoke about, including some coaching questions. So in other words, what we say is, hey, here's what we spoke about. Here's some of the things that resonated. These are the expectations, and this is what we would like you to do. We want you to reach out to that person. We want you to talk to them about this. We want you to ask them about how you can support them in the implementation of the experiment and the action plan. And we also communicate, of course, to the participants, say, hey, don't forget, you've got a requirement here to do this stuff and to play full out and to learn. And we find, you think about that, so you're having, over the space of 4 weeks, you're having 4 very targeted conversations with those individuals about not just what they learned, but what they are doing, and then having those follow-up conversations about what they did do and what they learned as a result of that and what the next steps look like. And then you've got a coaching call that puts together an action plan. There are some there's some pretty potent mix there that really encourages that action taking and that transition and growth and change that you're looking for. And the key part of that is, again, we look here at IML, our program's not the silver bullet, but what it is it provides a wonderful platform so that internally you can best support your person. And we'll guide them through that 70-20-10 process, but we rely on those internally to have a level of engagement as well. And we do our absolute best to make sure that occurs through multiple channels.
And thank you, Shannon. And Michelle, I will add that Shannon is very modest there, but one of the most amazing pieces of feedback comes out of the coaching as well. And I know you mentioned it briefly, Shannon, but the coaching, the one-on-one coaching with people like you is certainly the thing that we see enables people to translate that back into their own action plans and the way they're going to take that learning and implement it back into the workplace. And I know Shannon's very modest about that, but it's certainly the feedback we get is the experience working with Shannon one-on-one and facilitators like Shannon is that they're able to translate that back into the workplace in their own way with those action plans. So look, it's right on 1 o'clock and we've spent a great hour together. I thank you so much for your time and like I said at the beginning, the Essentials program is really if we use that sporting analogy, is our all-rounder. We're looking for aspiring managers or aspiring managers and leaders. We're looking for new managers, people looking to step up, those looking for a refresher. It's a great way to reboot your career and really, take your career forward from a management and leadership standpoint. It's highly accessible. It's all virtual, and you've got people like Shannon Cooper guiding you around. And the feedback, as Shannon demonstrated before, has been exceptional. And we know that it'll be a great program for anyone that does it. So please, if you'd like any more information. Yes, sorry, Shannon.
Just the other thing that we sort of haven't mentioned, and members can reach out to us, but financially, it's tremendous value as well. This is not a you might be sitting here going, how much is this going to cost? Well, it's actually financially exceptionally value packed and very accessible.
Yeah, that's right, Shannon. It's to be it's $16.50 for members of the Institute. So it is great value for what you get across those 8 virtual sessions, the coaching, the mentoring, and everything in between. So it's certainly, we've tried to price it that way. So because there's a lot of regional members as well that didn't have access to this quality of content, as well as people living in capital cities that don't want to attend face-to-face stuff at the moment. So the next available cohort is the 21st of October. Shannon's running that on the 21st of October. So please book in. I think there's a few more places left. We limit it to a maximum of 16 people per cohort. I think it's about half full already. So please, if you would like some more information, or if you would like today's slides and the information that some of the resources that Shannon talked about, the email address is info@managersandleaders.com.au. That's info@managersandleaders.com.au. Any more information, please jump on our website, have a look. We've got some great upcoming webinars. Shannon's doing a masterclass for us tomorrow on managing up, which will be superb. And we've obviously got upcoming program cohorts with Foundations, Accelerate, and of course our Essentials program that starts on the 21st of October. So once again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you to Shannon Cooper for giving up your hours today, Shannon, to come and present and speak about the virtues of the program, as well as learning a little bit about management and leadership at the same time. So thank you very much. We'll see you all soon, and stay well. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.